Hey everybody, as you can see I'm not in class today, although I am in the school, so if you need anything you can come by and see me. I'm playing principal today, in the absence of, or assistant principal in the absence of both Mr. Watts and Mr. Elliott. But just like time, our class marches on, so we're going to keep rolling. And we are actually going to finish, I think, the PowerPoint stuff, the actual content today. We'll have we'll do some, probably a review activity tomorrow, and then we'll test Monday, probably Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. We'll just have to see, because there are a couple of review things I want to do. But we're going to go ahead and get rolling with this. Our next section, we've done prenatal, we've done childhood, we've done adolescence, and so finally we are ending up our development unit with adulthood. Now, and adulthood is generally early to mid-20s on up. Some may put it around 18. Some people may put it around 20. Physically, there are a lot of people who will keep growing on into their 20s. And research now suggests that your brain does not really fully, I don't want to say mature, but does not get to sort of its final area or growth until well into your mid-20s. So there's actually, I may have you all read an article on the teenage brain and how sort of, I don't want to say messed up it is, but how difficult it is. So, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and get rolling with this. So in adulthood, your bodies will change, especially for you ladies. And generally, that is the time of is the first change you're going to see after you're an adult is menopause, and that's generally the time of natural cessation or of the stopping of menstruation. Essentially, you have released all of the eggs that you're going to release, and you have no more or less, and you no longer have a chance, I guess, of getting pregnant. There are physical changes, of course, later in life. Life expectancy as a whole, we now live longer than ever before, and women generally live longer than males. But what also happens, some physical changes, is that our sensory abilities get worse as we get older. Our visual acuity diminishes. You'll always hear adults talking about when they turn 40, they can no longer read things that are close up. All right, you'll see a lot of older people have to move their stuff away and move it away until it gets to the point where they've got to be reading stuff like this. And the reason is, of course, we know from our biology unit on vision that our vision, our ability to focus on things, comes from our lenses and our irises' ability to get smaller and bigger and to change the focus. As we get older, our eyes lose that ability to sort of change focus. So, I can read stuff, I don't know, let me give you an example of about where I am. All right, here's a text message screen. All right, about right here, things start getting slightly blurry. All right, here it's pretty clear. I'm 38, and generally around 40 is when things start having to move out. So, but I'm still pretty, and actually, even if I move my eyes up, change the focal point on my fovea, things will clear up. So, but anyways, visual acuity gets worse. Reaction time slows down. Muscle strength diminishes, as well as a lot of other areas. A lot of people need hearing aids as they get older. So a lot of things slow down and are not as clear or crisp as they are when we're, early 20s, 30s, something like that. Dementia and Alzheimer's. We'll talk about it for a minute. Alzheimer's, not old timers or Alzheimer's, as you hear a lot of people say. It's Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a progressive and irreversible brain disorder characterized by a gradual deterioration of memory, reasoning, language, and eventually physical functioning. I think many of us know relatives who have or have had Alzheimer's. My wife's grandmother has Alzheimer's, and I haven't seen her in probably a couple of years. I used to see her a lot. But the memory, she never really, by the time I met her, she was, for the most part, her memory was going. So she always called me Nick instead of Nathan, because Nick was one of Kara's first cousin's husbands. And, I wasn't going to correct her. But, reasoning goes away. You hear people, horror stories of, people being mean, people being upset, language ability goes, and then at some point your physical abilities go away. Research on estrogen therapy and Alzheimer's shows that women who took estrogen supplements for at least 10 years were 40% less likely to suffer from Alzheimer's. Now again, remember in our Unit 2 when we were talking about research, there is a correlation here, but not causation. So just keep that in mind. But apparently there may be a connection with estrogen. We'll talk a little bit more about dementia when we get into the psychological abnormalities unit. I think that's 13. I'll introduce you to Huntington's disease. If some of you do or do not know what that is that's a disease that runs in my family. It is genetic. I've got some video of my brother, kind of where he was maybe 5 years or 10 years ago, and then where he was, how he's changed within the past 5 to 8 years. I'll tell you a little bit of some stories on that, but that kind of falls into Huntington's disease is sort of like a dementia plus Lou Gehrig's disease and all kinds of other stuff. We'll get into that. Cognitive changes as we get older. Of course, aging affects our memory, according to researchers Schoenfield and Robertson. Recall declines with age, and there's sort of this cliche or stereotype, probably a better word, that older people can't remember. So, but there is some research that sort of bears that out. But there is no measurable decline in recognition tasks has been demonstrated. So you can still recognize people, but you may not remember their names. All right, and so there's a difference there. Information without a clear meaning or purpose or nonsense syllables, timed events, things like remembering medication, we can have issues with as we get older. Aging and, of course, and intelligence. Cross-sectional studies are studies in which people of different ages compared with one another. So you might be compared with somebody who's 20, who would also be compared with somebody who's 50, who may also be compared with somebody who's 70. So as these same studies looked at the same things, only across different ages. These types of studies show intelligence declines with age. So that is your intelligence actually will go down. So, but you got to remember, intelligence to one person and to one study may mean something different than to other studies. And we'll get into testing I think in 2 units, intelligence and testing. I think we go personality and then intelligence and testing, and then so that'll make a little more sense when we get to those units. A longitudinal study, research when the same people are studied and retested again over long periods of time. These types of studies show intelligence remains stable until very late in life. So you got 2 types of studies saying different things about different things. So one, studies, basically one study, the one that was cross-sectional, says older people tend to lose intelligence. However, if you take that same person and study them throughout their life, they find that for the most part the intelligence stays the same, or at least until very late in life. So what I want you to do right now is sort of pause this or sort of think about why that might be. Why the two, depending on how you study the people, you're going to come up with 2 different things. And it should be somewhat obvious, the difference between, think about it like this, me trying to study or trying to assess intelligence of people in different grades, kindergarten through 12th grade, all right, versus, so basically I would be, I'm going to back up, basically I'd be comparing the kindergartner to the 12th grader to the 10th grader to the 8th grader to the 4th grader. So they would all be sort of analyzed at once over the same stuff on what intelligence is, versus taking a kindergartner and following them all the way up through to the 12th grade and see how their intelligence changes. Now, obviously, these studies are not actually with younger kids, they're with older kids or older people, but the concept, I think, is going to be the same there. Then a cohort sequential study combines cross-sectional and longitude, corrects for the cohort effect. Cohort effect occurs because people raised in similar times might exhibit similar qualities. So here a good example of that is, you all may or may not know, I grew up with people who were raised during the Great Depression and immediately afterwards. And generally what happens is when most of those people have passed on now, but when I was growing up, they were, I want to say they tended to be hoarders, but they're the people who would, if they were creating or replacing maybe a wooden table or maybe an old barn or something like that, they would save the nails and maybe try and straighten them out. And the reason is they grew up having a very limited supply of a lot of things. And so they got in the habit of keeping things and to restoring things and fixing things that could be fixed, as opposed to having to go out and buy them because, one, you didn't have the money, or 2, you may not have been able to just get it. The supplies were low. So as I was growing up, you had a large group of the population, the older population, who tended to hold on to things and fix things. That population, for the most part, has since died. And so now you have the older population tends to be the baby boomers, which was the what you call the greatest generation, the generation who was growing up during the Depression and World War II. These baby boomers were sort of some of the first mass-produce people. By people, I mean people who would buy things in the marketplace that were mass-produced. Mass-produced dishes, mass-produced TVs, mass-produced furniture, things that were sort of getting rolling, mass-produced cars, all these things. And so there's more. There isn't as much today of a value of fixing things because it's just easier and more economical now to maybe purchase something new that's broken as opposed to trying fixing it. So I say all of that to show how the cohort effect can affect results, because you may have changes in, if you try and measure the intelligence of somebody based on their ability to put together and to fix a ham radio, versus throughout the generations. Well, the older generation is going to do really well at that because that's what they did. They didn't, but this, maybe the Gen Xers, the millennials, that people like that who have not had ham radios, we've got cell phones. They're not. It's not obviously they're not going to know how to fix a ham radio. So that's kind of what the cohort effect, or what the cohort sequential study does to counteract the cohort effect. And now we get to crystallized intelligence. Again, these are all terms essentially you should know. This is one's accumulated knowledge and verbal skills, which does tend to increase with age. I'm going to want to make sure that you are fairly clear on this, because I know for a fact there is an FRQ that was asked a few years ago dealing with crystallized intelligence. Again, this is one's accumulated knowledge and verbal skills. And as you might agree, the more experience you have, the more things you learn, the more you talk to people, that is going to increase with age. So crystallized intelligence is important to know. Then there's fluid intelligence. This is one's ability to reason speedily and abstractly. And this tends to decrease during late adult age. So two different types of intelligences. Crystallized, this is accumulated knowledge and verbal skills. All right, now that's different from fluid intelligence, which that's you get into reasoning and abstract thinking, solving problems, things like that. Then as we get older, changes occur in society, or we have social changes as well. In what's known as middle adulthood, 40s to 60s, it's where I'll be supposedly, hopefully, no more heart issues in the next couple weeks, couple years. This is generally known as a generativity versus stagnation. I think we've mentioned this earlier. Generativity is generating new ideas versus stagnation, which is sort of keeping with the old. In this, when they studied this, the task was for the middle-aged to discover a sense of contributing to the world, usually through family and work. If they do not develop this sense, they will feel a lack of purpose. This is where the midlife crisis comes in. These are men who maybe see their life starting to move away, and they may not feel that they have contributed enough or things like that. And so they start doing these wild things to sort of contribute to society. And that many times that can manifest itself in a sports car, and just talk about, wow, I've contributed to the world so much that I'm able to drive this nice fancy car. And then in late adulthood, this is generally 60s and up, is characterized by integrity and despair. Remember, these are sort of relating to Erik Erikson's theory on development. So this sort of straddles a couple different theories. And this is integrity versus despair. In this, you have a sense of satisfaction with the life that has been led, or a sense of failure and despair at opportunities lost. This is the I wish I would have. And then social clock, the culturally preferred timing of social events such as marriage, parenthood, and retirement. You got to think about this. What generally, if I had you all guess at what age you would expect to be married, at what age you would expect to be a parent, and what age would you expect to be retired, those are social cues. And some may be a year or two off generally between each one. You might have one or two of you that are just buck the trend just because you want to buck the trend. But generally, if we were really honest with ourselves, we will see that we all sort of have the same general ideas on when it's a good idea to get married, when it's a good idea to become a parent, and when it's a good idea to retire. Here's a couple. We're almost done. Here's some graphs to kind of illustrate how our vision changes over time. This graph looks at the proportion of normal, which is 20/20 vision when identifying letters on an eye chart, versus your age in years. So, as you can see, you really don't get your best vision till you're about 20. So, my daughter has glasses, but the eye doctor said she would probably not need them as she gets older. And it's sort of as they steadily drop off over time until you get about 70, and then at 70, it really drops off quick. So again, this is just an example of aging. Here's identifying smells. Again, you're probably the best at about 20, and then it falls off steeply it falls off, but not steeply until about 70, and then boom, at 70 years old, it falls. And this is just your ability to smell or to identify what you're smelling. Again, this is a percent correct when identifying spoken words. Again, there's this is not as drastic, but it is an exponential drop-off of your ability to identify spoken words. And then physical again, this is your reaction time. This looks at accidents per two things: fatal accidents per 10,000 drivers who are at this age, whatever that point on the graph is, and then fatal accidents per 100 million miles. Oh, stop. Cancel. So in this graph, this is fatal accidents per 10,000 drivers who's that age. You'll notice at 16, generally there's 6 fatal accidents per 10,000 drivers when you're 16. That drops off tremendously and really falls until you're about 25. And this is why at 25, most rental car companies don't allow you to rent a vehicle until you're 25. And this is the reason why. They just have a tendency it's just economics and it's statistics. Once you hit 25, that levels off, but it still drops till you're about 60. And then right at around 60, it starts to increase. Then you're looking, this graph looks at the risk of dementia by age. As you can see, I don't know where my cursor went. I like having it sort of point at things. As you get older, your increase of dementia goes up. And this is an interesting statistic that says, between 90 and 95, when you get between 90 and 95 years old, you have almost a 40% chance of suffering from dementia. That's kind of startling for me. Now, truth be told, there's not a whole lot of people that get that old. And so I wonder how you could correct that out with the population, but at least statistically. And then again, cognitive development, we've talked about this. This is what sort of each one looks at. It's the cross-sectional study and longitudinal study both. Longitudinal study is not as drastic. Again, this follows somebody throughout their life versus comparing each person to somebody else. So, age and driving, I think this is that same slide. Development, death and dying is sort of we're running towards the end. Development is lifelong. You will develop your entire life. And then finally, death is the final challenge. We've had some interesting conversations the last little bit just on, I think it revealed some things about our thoughts on life. on our thoughts on the afterlife. For some of you, the thoughts of the lack of an afterlife. So, but death is the final challenge. How do we face that challenge? So, and this is the last little bit. This is the end. Kubler and Ross came up with sort of their stages of what they call stages of death. Maybe you're told you're getting ready to die, or you have maybe um, in our discussions on morality, maybe this is the person who has the cancer or whatever. But the first stage of death is denial, resistance to the initial discovery by seeking other opinions, or refusal to accept that death will occur. And anger and resentment comes next. Often is directed at others out of resentment, frustration, or feelings of injustice. I've lived my life clean. I've lived my life well. Why am I the one with cancer, while Joe down the street, who has smoked 10 packs of cigarettes for 25 years, is not the one with the lung cancer? It's me, who's never smoked a day in my life. That can lead to anger and resentment. Then you have bargaining for more time, generally with God or fate or medical professionals, to change the situation. Put me in a drug trial. Put me in an experiment. I don't care what the ramifications are. I just want to live. Eventually, when the inevitability of death hits, Kubler and Ross suggest depression is next. Grieving or depression may occur for all that will be lost. And then finally, acceptance. This is giving up to death, becoming more resolved, withdrawn, and emotionally drained. But I would suggest, I know a lot of people who have faith, and their version of acceptance is much different. It is not giving up to death. They don't become more withdrawn and emotionally drained. In fact, many of them become empowered. Many of them become comforted. And I don't know where that falls in Kubler-Ross's ideas. I don't know if they were just looking at people who were not of a faith, or who may be atheistic or agnostic. But I will say, from my own personal experience, and you all may have experienced this too, that generally those people who are at sort of death's doorstep, those of them who are of faith. Now, I'll premise this by saying it's always been a Christian faith of these people I've been around. They have generally been very calm, collective. They might be scared, but at the same time, there's a peace about them. So, again, I don't know where that might fit. That's just my own personal experiences. Another couple people studied this. This is Ramsey and DeGroote's stages of grief. Shock, which is the initial reaction. Then disorganization, our inability to plan, probably because we're so distraught. Then comes denial, behaving as if the deceased is still alive. Now, this is for the people who have been told that either a family member or somebody they love or somebody they're close to is going to die. So this is not necessarily as much the person who is dying as it is the people around them. So again, shock, disorganization, denial, depression. Fifth comes guilt, thoughts or behaviors towards the dead. Anxiety about the inability to cope with the changes. Aggression, resolution, then reintegration. And I will say, my wife's mother passed away 2-3 years ago from cancer, and it was very quick. We went from in beginning of October of planning a trip to Florida over Christmas break to her being dead by 2 days before Thanksgiving. So within a month, we went from planning a trip to passing away. So, and I saw my wife sort of roll through these all very clearly. Now, there are times where she will sort of revert back. There are times when she'll revert back to depression. There are times when she revert back to um, aggression. And because she's not really, I don't know if she's gotten to the reintegration yet. I think really she's just now at the resolution to where she can sort of accept it. So, death is a hard thing. Evaluation. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is the last slide. Much of the evidence comes from observational studies. Various responses to death are based on culture, and that's something to consider. A lot of these are from a Western perspective, but when you start looking at things like in the Far East, the expression of grief will vary. In Japanese, there's sort of a stoicism, a lack of showing emotion, to Muslims, which will wail and rock as they mourn their dead. So, and it's different. And the duration of these responses will vary. The Navajo had a 4-day mourning period, to where an Orthodox Jew will have a period of about a year. So a lot of the response to death is cultural. So, anyways, that's all we got for today. Hope this wasn't too boring. I would suggest maybe discussing with whatever time is left in class some of these ideas. You all do a good job of having a cordial and good discussions. So I'm going to leave you all with that. I may pop my head in from time to time to check on you all. So, anyways, hope you all are having a good day, and I will see you around school today. Peace.